The security environment across the Gulf has entered a new and increasingly volatile phase tonight as rhetoric from Tehran sharpens and strategic signaling intensifies across military, political, and maritime domains. Statements issued by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, along with parallel warnings from Iran's broader military command structure, reflect a deepening standoff with the United States and its regional partners. At the center of this escalation is a renewed cycle of deterrent messaging. Iranian officials are warning that any further military action against the country will be met with a response designed not only to match, but to exceed the expectations of its adversaries. The language being used is deliberate, calculated, and intended for strategic effect, shaping decision-making in Washington, Tel Aviv, and allied capitals across the region. The IRC has issued one of its strongest recent public statements, explicitly warning the United States and Israel that any renewed strike or hostile operation would trigger what it describes as an expanded and intensified response. In its messaging, the IRC emphasized that Iran's reaction to any future aggression would not be limited in scope or geography. Instead, it suggested a doctrine of proportional escalation that could extend across land, air, and maritime environments. The statement framed Iran's position in the language of deterrence, asserting that strategic restraint should not be misinterpreted as weakness, and underscoring that Iran retains both the capability and readiness to respond decisively to perceived violations of its sovereignty or security. In a separate but closely aligned statement, Iran's Qatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, one of the key operational command structures associated with the IRC, issued additional warnings focusing specifically on maritime security and regional naval activity. The command described potential Western naval actions in the region as acts that could be interpreted as blockade, piracy, or hostile interference, warning that such actions would trigger a decisive and calibrated response. It further emphasized that Iranian armed forces are operating at a heightened level of readiness, particularly in coastal defense, maritime surveillance, and control of strategic waterways. A central theme of the statement was Iran's continued assertion of influence over the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most strategically important maritime choke points. Iranian officials reiterated that control and monitoring of transit through the strait remain core elements of their national security doctrine, even amid ongoing regional tensions. The command also suggested readiness for a wide range of contingency scenarios, including expanded ground and maritime operational responses in the event of escalation. The Strait of Hormuz has once again become the focal point of regional tension. This narrow waterway connecting the Persian Gulf to the Arabian Sea carries a significant share of global oil and gas shipments. Iran has recently reinforced its regulatory posture over maritime transit in the strait, implementing stricter coordination protocols for vessel movement. Reports indicate that while commercial shipping continues, vessels associated with the United States, Israel, or affiliated entities face heightened scrutiny or restrictions. Tehran has framed these measures as defensive actions aimed at safeguarding sovereignty and ensuring maritime security. Western governments and shipping authorities, however, interpret them as coercive tools intended to exert political pressure through control of critical infrastructure. This divergence has deepened concerns among global shipping operators and energy markets about stability in one of the world's most important trade corridors. In parallel with Iran's statements, Western defense reporting has indicated that military planners in the United States have explored a range of contingency options in the Gulf region. These reportedly include enhanced naval deployments and temporary positioning of forces in strategically sensitive locations near Iranian waters. The stated objective is to maintain freedom of navigation, deter disruption of commercial shipping, and ensure rapid response capability in the event of escalation. Iranian officials have strongly rejected these considerations, describing them as violations of sovereignty and destabilizing actions that increase the risk of confrontation. Against this backdrop of rising tension, diplomatic efforts have suffered a setback. Pakistan attempted to mediate discussions between Iranian and U.S. representatives following earlier ceasefire efforts. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi reportedly engaged in consultations in Islamabad with Pakistani intermediaries. However, the talks ultimately ended without progress, with both sides accusing each other of unreasonable conditions. The collapse highlights the difficulty of third-party mediation in a context defined by deep mistrust and competing security narratives. Compounding diplomatic uncertainty, recent political messaging from Washington has introduced further ambiguity. U.S. leadership has alternated between openness to engagement and assertions of strategic dominance. At one point, plans were announced to dispatch special envoys to resume dialogue in Islamabad, but this initiative was later canceled in favor of remote communication channels. Public remarks emphasize reliance on telephone diplomacy rather than direct engagement, reinforcing perceptions of inconsistency in approach. Iranian officials and advisors have responded with strong rhetoric of their own. Senior figures close to Iran's leadership have emphasized national unity and resilience, portraying the country as prepared for sustained confrontation if necessary. These statements also criticize Western reliance on coercive diplomacy, framing it as counterproductive and destabilizing. On the maritime front, there have been increasing reports of tense encounters between naval forces and commercial shipping in and around the Strait of Hormuz. Maritime tracking organizations have documented incidents involving vessel inspections, rerouting, and close proximity encounters. While no major confrontation has occurred, the frequency of these events has raised concerns about the risk of miscalculation in a congested and strategically sensitive environment. Shipping companies have reportedly increased caution, adjusted routes, and enhanced security measures. Regional states are closely monitoring developments. Gulf countries are balancing concerns over security with the need to maintain stable trade flows. Globally, energy markets remain sensitive to any threat of disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, given its importance to oil and gas exports. European and Asian economies are particularly attentive to potential supply chain impacts, while diplomatic channels remain active but limited in effectiveness. One of the most pressing risks is miscalculation. The combination of heightened military readiness, assertive rhetoric, and close naval proximity creates an environment where even minor incidents could escalate. A navigational dispute or communication failure at sea could potentially trigger broader confrontation if not carefully managed. The absence of a stable diplomatic framework increases reliance on deterrence as the primary stabilizing mechanism. Beyond geopolitics, the humanitarian and economic implications are significant. Civilian shipping crews face elevated risks, while regional economies could suffer from instability in energy markets. Prolonged tension also raises the possibility of wider regional disruption with cascading global effects. The situation remains highly unstable, defined by competing narratives of deterrence and sovereignty. Iran continues to emphasize control over strategic waterways and readiness to respond to perceived aggression, while the United States and its partners stress freedom of navigation and deterrence of disruption. Diplomatic efforts have so far failed to bridge this divide. At present, the Gulf remains in a fragile equilibrium. Military signaling continues on both sides. Diplomatic channels remain strained, and maritime tensions persist. Whether the situation moves toward renewed dialogue or deeper confrontation will depend on decisions made in the coming days. The risk of escalation remains real, shaped by uncertainty, mistrust, and the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz as both a lifeline of global trade and a potential flashpoint for conflict.